The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Today we present part 2 of our interview on prophetic NDEs with researchers Robert and Suzanne Mays. If you missed last week's part 1 of this discussion, I'd suggest you listen to last week's show in our past shows archives. Robert and Suzanne Mays have studied the phenomena of near-death experiences together for some 40 years. Their research focuses on the phenomena connected with the out-of-body component of NDEs, especially veridical perceptions and other verified paranormal phenomena during an NDE. On this and last week's show, Robert and Suzanne preview for us their talk at this year's IANDS conference on prophetic visions in near-death experience with warnings for our current time. NDEs frequently give indications that time during the experience is suspended, that the transcendent realm is actually timeless, and that the events of the NDE seem to occur all at once. Two key elements in many NDEs relating to time are a life review and a life preview, visions of likely future events in the NDEr's personal life or in world events. In their talk, the Mays focus is on prophetic visions of future world events, and we continue that discussion today. Robert and Suzanne, welcome back to NDE Radio.
Thank you, Lee.
Good morning, Lee.
Good morning. Good morning. It's good to have you back, and good to continue this discussion. We had a chance to discuss the nature of free will a little bit. When prophecy occurs, especially in powerful visions like Kenneth, for instance, it seems to be written in concrete, and but free will you'd think would mitigate against that. So why don't you talk a little about free will, the nature of free will?
Right. So, there are certain principles that we get out of NDEs, and because it's very obvious, it's actually sometimes explicitly stated. And of course, the most common principle is that we are eternal spiritual beings. We don't die with the death of the physical body. And the second one, at least in my mind or our minds, is that we have free will, which means that God cannot interfere with our free will choices. And that's why why humanity has run so much amok, is that we have free will choices and then we have to live with the consequences of them.
And then we have free will choices of how we're going to respond to these disruptions.
Right. And so one can respond positively or one can respond negatively. And this is what some of these visions are giving us, is that we're going to be thrown into situations more and more terrible and difficult, and how are we going to respond? So we had with the attacks on 9/11, there were these cases where we after that time, it was noted, I think fairly widely, that people went back to church and they started to pray again, and that this was a positive time in a sense, that people were turning back to the spiritual aspect of themselves and becoming more kind and accepting of others, particularly since there was this tremendous response to against Muslims at the time. And people responded, saying, wait a minute, that's not right. There are citizens, there are brothers and sisters. And so there was a counter response to that, as opposed to hatred and seeking vengeance. And so So we will be thrown into ever worsening, in our view, it will be ever worsening situations, tests. How are we going to respond? And it will be our free will choice, and that will then determine the consequences. It will mitigate bad consequences if we choose love and kindness and sharing and helping others, serving others, as opposed to greed and hatred and killing others.
There was a Christian, I don't know if he was a bishop in the church or just a monk, named Diosculus, lived in Cyprus, and he had this idea that we, with our good emotions or our bad emotions, send out spiritual powers that he called elementals that would influence not only our own feelings but the rest of the world as well. So in a way, prayer would be a good elemental. Yeah. And yes. Hatred and racial prejudice and those impulses would be evil. Now, do you think that if enough evil gets generated just psychologically, not to mention pollution and all the bad things that we physically do to the earth, would that be a cause for, say, the caldera at Yellowstone to explode?
Yes, it could be. We have to do more research about that specifically. This is, some worldwide catastrophe which could bring on a years-long winter, which would cause tremendous starvation and suffering. That is mentioned in a lot of places. And then the outcome after that is also shown in several places. I wanted to go back to this point about what really counts. So in the life review, people having a life review, they report pretty unanimously, that what really counts when you're having your life review and there's a being or several beings around you who are with you, they're not judging you, you're judging yourself, but they will respond to, when there are, when the things that count come up, and the things that count are kindness, love, caring, and serving others. And it isn't worldly accomplishments or fame or wealth. Those don't count. Those actually, they just, as the being of light mentioned to George Ritchie, that just glorified you. You became an Eagle Scout. That glorified you. Mm. But it was when he showed kindness and caring and serving. So these are the things that count. And so those are the things that's the currency, so to say. Love is the currency in the spiritual world, none of this other stuff. And so when you have these negative things, then yes, they can bring about these really worldwide disasters. At least that appears to be what happened. And of course, there's always the story of Noah, where, the evil deeds, and we're not given a lot of details about them, of the people brought on this flood. And there was only one righteous person, one righteous family who was saved, and they were guided how to be saved.
Yes. And actually, we were told, at least in the Bible, that we won't be destroyed by flood again. But of course, the fire next time could very well be nuclear war,
right? Or a massive super volcano. Yes.
Or exactly right. One of the things that has compelled fundamental Christianity, looking toward the second coming, has made a lot of people less conscious of destroying the earth through pollution and, all the environmental destruction, the destruction of the bees and the butterflies and all this stuff that we're doing right now to the rest of the planet.
Okay, well, I'd like to respond to this because I've been thinking about this. There are certain fundamentalist teachings that are saying, well, in order for there to be the second coming, we have to destroy the earth because it won't be until certain things happen, like the temple in Jerusalem is destroyed, or I don't know what the teachings are exactly. That is completely off base, and it's like twisting around the spiritual principles into something that I have to say is evil, because it is we learned from Rabbi Stephen Robbins that in the Torah, the commentary on the Torah, there is this notion that God cannot fix what we mess up on the earth. God does not have the power to fix what we mess up. So if people want to have heaven on earth, they better be going in the direction of heaven rather than nuclear war. And this is because what we end up with, if there were a nuclear war, I think the response of the earth would be to have, if the nuclear war itself does not destroy everything and cause a global winter, there could easily be the response, given all the terrible things we've done with nuclear weapons and testing and all that, a response finally that says, this is what you have set in motion, and here it is. Here's the supervolcano or a huge tsunami or et cetera, et cetera. And that's the consequence of what we have set in motion.
Right.
So
the notion of a second coming as salvation, rather than, it's not a blessing if we've destroyed the earth and as a result Jesus comes back. I think that's the other thing too that I might as well ask you about right now is, have you had any what is your feeling about reincarnation and the notion that we return to this earth again and again?
Yeah, we think that the evidence for that is pretty strong with in NDEs, people being shown their past lives in the NDE, and also, of course, the research done by Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker and many others of children that remember their past lives.
Right. So what we're doing is we're creating or destroying the world that we would ultimately wish to come back to.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And this is where, in a way, and this would be a good place to talk about this, in a way this would be good if there was something that, if we mess up the earth so badly, and we don't have to, and we can still mitigate it. But if we do, and there is the terrible response, of a supervolcano or an asteroid hitting, and these are all, by the way, predictions that we are seeing, asteroid hitting the Earth, that there's this global winter for years. People will starve. Very few people will survive. And of course, that's terrible, but we have to remember that we don't die. So dying is actually a release from this physical world into something that is much better, a heavenly realm. But in any case, when this happens, and how we respond to this situation is another thing. But what will come about, what is the ultimate scenario, is given in visions that Howard Storm had. Actually, Kenneth has it also, and Don Coffey, among others. And this vision, and actually I think it would be good to read a little bit of Howard Storm. His book is My Descent into Death. And he's saying that people will have all kinds of, it will be a very wooded areas of the world will be wooded. People will have spiritual powers. He's not putting in this our interpretation of it. They'll have spiritual powers to be able to raise their own food. And he says people raised, in this vision, he's saying people raised food by sitting next to plants and communing with them. In a few minutes, they could harvest mature fruits and vegetables. They ate they grew immediately without cooking. And that that's a spiritual ability. We certainly don't have that now. They would be able to control weather and the climate so that it would be hospitable, and they would commune telepathically. There would be no need for technology. They would have the power to control matter and energy, and they will be able to commune telepathically with everyone on Earth and with people on other planets, with intelligent beings on other worlds, and so on. And so this this picture of the Earth covered with forests and small communities of people living together harmoniously, and then this is all around the world, and that people can travel from one place to the other by a kind of teleportation, I guess you could say, and they would be able to be healed by a kind of psychic ability in prayer, and then when they are somebody is ready to die because they've learned everything they need to learn in the earthly life, they would have a transition back to spirit, and it would be a joyous occasion. So this is the picture, and we get a similar thing with Ken Leth's picture, and Don Coffey is a fellow who had a dream, a very vivid, intense dream, such as one gets in a prophetic vision, where he was in a dirigible, a blimp kind of thing that was floating easily over southern Ohio and eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, and he looked off in the distance, and he saw to the west, and he saw that there was this great sea, which was where the Mississippi had been. And this sea stretched from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up through the Great Lakes and up to Hudson Bay. And so he said that this would happen in 300 years.
This account is in the Journal for Near-Death Studies by IANDS.
Yeah, he wrote a letter to about it.
So in the 300 intervening years, does that mean that we lay waste to the earth and then we recover slowly and learn these spiritual gifts?
Yes. So it would be as early as, the vision that Howard Storm had was, he said it would be 200 years from 1985, so it would be 2185. So that's 160 years from now.
So in the meantime, if there are close to 8 billion souls on Earth, are we reincarnating as roaches and rats? And no. Whatever is left, to live on the Earth until we finally mature enough to be able to grow our fruit spiritually?
Well, first of all, I think that many people have lots to learn. And so they would be incarnating, but slowly, back to the earth to learn. And and the lessons are not to be the way they probably lived, in the present time, but to be more loving and kind. And actually, because these pictures show that there's a spiritual advancement. We're talking about powers that are so beyond what, we currently have. That,
so lofty.
Right. That, there's a whole lot of things to learn. And a lot of that can be learned in the spiritual realm between earthly lives. But then you have to come to the earth to learn. And so it will be a gradual process that people will gradually be brought in and learn these abilities and these faculties, basically.
Do most of the long-range prophecies that you've studied end on a happy note?
Well, yes, that's correct.
It's a reset.
Yeah. So this is implying that we may get to the point, in fact, we may be beyond the point right now, that there needs to be a reset. And the reset is not going to be pleasant. But again, we come back that we do not die. We are eternal spiritual beings. And so there is not this, should not be this fear that, oh my gosh, everybody's going to die. NDErs would say, well, hey, that's okay.
Yes.
So it's a time, it will be a time where humanity will be more able to spiritualize material existence.
Yeah, and that in fact is, that's what Howard Storm is saying. If you think about it, that we can control climate and that we can commune telepathically with everybody on the earth and with people on other worlds.
In the cosmos.
In the cosmos, and that, that we can control the climate and that we can control the raising of food. And basically what people did then was to raise children, and educate their children. And in fact, it wasn't just the parents, but the whole community raised the children. And if you think that's indeed what is needed, because, there will be a lot of people coming in that need to learn these things.
Yes. Right now our children are all staring at phone-sized screens and computers and not even paying attention to the beauty of nature, except in a virtual world sort of way.
Right.
So what we're told is that the full-time avocation would be that the work with children and raising of children was both play and the love of the work.
Right.
There was no difference.
Yeah, So there isn't any work in quotes.
Yeah.
Work. It's play.
Is this a product of spiritual growth or technological achievement?
Product of spirituality.
Yeah, he said that there would be no technology, but he did say that people had these ornaments. They had necklaces that had these what appeared to be metallic or crystalline parts that were on it, and they had some purpose. But anyway, but there would not be the technology that we have now. There'd be no need for it. If you can commune telepathically with anybody, then there's no need for a cell phone.
That's right, for G5 or whatever it is they're
right.
promoting, and there wouldn't be a need for vast corporations making vast wealth at the expense of the rest of us.
Right.
There wouldn't be a hoarding.
Yeah, which is what's a key component in the destruction of the earth.
There would be no exploitation.
So
can we jump time and be there now?
No, we have to go through this, and in fact, the fact that you're here means that you wanted to go through this.
So the saying is, no pain, no gain.
I think you're right, Suzanne, sadly.
I'd like to do one other thing, and that is to talk about one thing that very likely can happen, in addition to what Ken Leth's vision is of the current political situation, and that is that one thing that can happen that we think is quite plausible is that there will be a global and this is brought out in some of the NDE stories, visions, I should say, that there would be a global power grid problem. The snare that would bring it. So electricity would be wiped out. Electrical system would be wiped out. No computers, no telephone. No computers, no smartphones, no internet, no satellites, and then economic chaos would ensue, and it would lead to people stealing, killing, and hoarding, rather than sharing and helping and acting out of love rather than fear. And
yes.
So we're getting some of these situations now, with blackouts, but this could happen because of the weakening of the Earth's magnetic field, and that's accelerating now, apparently. Scientific measurements are showing that. And therefore, we are much more susceptible to solar flares that, when we had a strong magnetic field, would not cause any problem at all. But then there would be even these relatively benign solar flares and solar eruptions will cause this kind of power outages, and if there were a major solar eruption or a coronal mass ejection, then that would cause wide-scale disruption of the power grid. And this happened back in 1859. There wasn't a lot of technology back then, but there was telegraphy, and that had a tremendous negative effect on the telegraph system.
Right. Well, speaking of loss of power, we've run out of time,
okay.
Robert.
That's
and
all right.
I want to thank both of you, Robert and Suzanne Mays, for doing this and then doing it again in part 2. You guys will be speaking on NDEs and prophecy at the upcoming IANDS conference near Philadelphia. I hope the listeners, all of you who can attend, will attend and be there for that talk. I certainly plan to be. For more on that, please go to IANDS.org. And if you'd like to listen to this show again or any of our past shows, check out our website at NDEradio.org. And join us again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. And this is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.